Welcome to Talking Up Music Education, a podcast from the NAMM Foundation. The NAMM Foundation is working to assure that all children have the opportunity to learn and grow with music, and that music is part of daily living for everyone. Talking Up Music Education podcast shares news and stories about music education from teachers, students, parents, school, and community leaders who care about music education and are working to create more opportunities for music learning. And now, here's your host, Mary Larson.
Hello, and welcome to Talking Up Music Education. We have another edition of Talking Up Music Education recorded during Grand National Marching Band Competition presented by Music for All in Indianapolis in early November. Our host today is Mark Despotakis, NAMM member from Progressive Music located near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Mark serves on the steering committee of the Support Music Coalition and is advocacy chairman for the Pennsylvania Music Education Association. Mark's guests are NAMM members Mark Goff and Tom Meyer, and they will share their roles as music education advocates in their communities and how, as local music retailers, they are integral to serving and supporting music education in public schools. Take it away, Mark. Enjoy the podcast.
Hi, I'm Mark Despotakis. I'm the Director of Market Development at Progressive Music, located just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I want to thank the NAMM Foundation for asking me to host today's edition of Talking Up Music Education. We're celebrating music education from the Bands of America Grand Nationals put on by Music for All here at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, Indiana. Thank you to our participants for joining us today to discuss the important work of building a state coalition to advocate for music education as part of the curriculum in the classroom. A note that this monthly podcast will be available in full in the last week of November, and you can subscribe to Talking About Music Education on iTunes or visit nammfoundation.org for more information. Joining us today, and I should say before I introduce these guys that we are here live at Lucas Oil Stadium, so you might actually hear some bands in the background as we're performing, which is very cool. Joining me is Mark Goff from Paige's Music here in Indiana, and Tom Meyer from Meyer Music in Missouri. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
And
Thanks
for all the work you're doing for advocacy. So I think maybe what we should probably do first is I'll go to both of you and say, just tell me a little bit about the work that you're doing through your business and then through your communities as far as advocating for music education for children. Mark, do you want to start?
Sure. So for me, I started with NAMM at the annual fly-in at the federal level. We bring a group of music dealers and NAMM members from around the country, and we meet with elected officials each year to talk about music education. And in that process, I learned some lessons. Number one, I learned that advocacy is really not that complicated. It's simply a matter of making an appointment with someone who has influence and talking about something that you're passionate about. I also learned in that process, meeting with senators and elected representatives, their staff. I have yet to meet one person who is against music education. So we have this great message that people are for, and many of the people that we've met with have had a positive experience, personal experience in music education. What we usually find is that even though they've had a great personal experience, there's a lack of understanding of what it takes to build and maintain a good music program. And so with that lack of understanding, they make decisions that have unintended consequences. So, I see our role as advocates is we just need to help them understand. And because of the players change continually, we have to be at it continually. It's an evergreen issue, which requires an evergreen strategy. So how did I bring that back home to Indiana? I've been in our business now for 30 years, and every year I hear some significant challenge against a music program in Indiana. And I'm guessing for the rest of my career, I'll hear about challenges against music programs in Indiana. So, we have to develop a strategy to meet that issue on a long-term basis. So I came back and connected with our two music education organizations, Lane Vallejo from IMEA and Rusty Briel from ISMA. And we recruited a small group of core leaders to start a steering committee. Lane, Rusty, Mike Campice from Conn-Selmer, John Whitman from Yamaha, and Matt Carter from the city of Indianapolis. And we actually just spent several months early on just kind of organizing and dreaming and developing our mission and talking about what it is that we wanted to accomplish and what was possible to accomplish. We came up with the mission to ensure that every K through 12 student in Indiana has reliable access to music education taught by a certified instructor as part of a well-rounded core curriculum. And then we spent most of this last year, 2015, going on what we called a listening tour, and where we all met individually with influencers throughout the state of Indiana, either in K through 12 education. We've met with superintendents, education curriculum instructors, higher education, community leaders. We've met with elected officials, both at the state and federal level, just so that we could understand the dynamics of what is all involved in this issue. You know, our tendency is to say, well, if we would only mandate it, then music education would be fine. But the reality that we found is that's not the case. It's a much broader issue than that. So the things that we've learned, I think, are going to lead us to our next steps, which we're in the process of developing over the next few weeks. But I think it's going to boil down to developing a group that does state-level advocacy, you know, talking with those key influencers, the legislatures, and doing the work at the state level, talking about legislation and mandates and those kind of things. But we also need to develop district-level advocacy, so down to the local school district, with a broader coalition, I believe, of teachers and parents and business leaders. And if you do the math, you know, there are over 100 school districts in the state of Indiana. That's going to probably require some additional resources, maybe some staffing, some sort of a fixed organization that we build. So that's kind of where we're at right now in the state of Indiana, and we're committed to continuing that work, but we're doing it in a way that we can sustain it over the long term.
So we're going to come back and talk a little bit about the partnerships later, but one of the key takeaways, I think the key points of what you're doing, I know every time that we've talked in the last year or so, first question I say is, how is this going? Because I've been so impressed by really how deliberate you have been in not saying we're going to jump right in and make every decision right now. Right. You've been very deliberate in how you're forming the partnerships and in how you're deciding what's next. Where do you go with this? And I think that's a key takeaway for others who want to do this.
Yeah, the tendency, though, the emotional reaction is that we need to gather the crowd with, you know, pitchforks and torches and storm the State House. And that may make us feel good, but the reality is it's not enough, you know. And so we may do some of that, minus the pitchforks and the torches. You know, we may do some of those state level events, but I was told, I think it was Mike Huckabee that said, 1 in the chamber is worth 100 on the steps, right? So we're trying to go the other direction. That is, make sure we're developing relationships with people who have influence, who can help us get to those tipping point, you know, times and discussions, and have an impact there. Then at the same time, do that at the district level.
It's a lot of work ahead.
A lot of work. Right.
You know, we're going to come back and talk about the partnerships and how that works. But let's go to Missouri. Tom, tell us about what your role has been in Missouri and what's happening statewide.
Well, statewide, we have not really done something quite as extensive as what Mark and the folks in Indiana are getting going. You know, much like Mark and his business, we've been very fortunate, I believe, within that state and within that part of the United States to be in an area of the country where music education has continued to be something that is in the curriculum, and there haven't been a tremendous number of assaults on that. But my experience has been mostly within our local school district in terms of, you know, making sure that the administration and the people at central office understand the value and, you know, the votes at stake, certainly in terms of the programs there. Again, we've been very fortunate. One of our bands is here at Grand Nationals. We've got another high school in Blue Springs that has got a tremendous program as well. And so, the number of students that are involved in that have really kept the wolf away from the door to this point. But I think that for me personally, and I took place with the NAMM fly-in at the national level last year, and I would agree with Mark wholeheartedly, there is not anybody out there that is against this, but it has to be an inch-by-inch kind of approach in terms of staying in front of them. And a lot of our customers, which are the directors, it's kind of the chicken or the egg. You have to build the program to keep the wolf away from the door, and it can't be the other way around. And so there's a lot of advocacy in that in terms of just the educational part of making sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. And if they do that, and those students are involved, and those parents are involved, then it's a highly visible educational opportunity, then some of these other things are going to take care of themselves.
That's a really interesting point. I run across this in Pennsylvania in our advocacy work, and we have people who say, well, we want to storm the state house. And we kind of temper that and say, in a sense, what you're doing is advocacy by having your students participate and being there to support them in some public way and supporting them with administrators. And there is the need for those of us who are working on the policy side and looking at it from that 30,000-foot level, and then as it comes down to a district policy level. But you make a fantastic point about advocacy is just being there and being a part of the programs. So that's really important.
Well, they have to take care of their business. They have to help themselves before we can then have really a leg to stand on when you're going to the superintendent or the associate superintendent, or they have to take care of that. And
right.
Then if they do, we will help them.
And our good friend Bob Morrison, who's just an amazing advocate, he said one time, and it stuck with me, advocacy is not something that you do. An advocate is who you are. And what you do comes out of who you are. And so we've spent some time, actually at my own company, talking about the importance of strengthening music education. And I've even challenged my own staff to say, first of all, answer the question why. Why is this important? If you answer the question why, then what follows that becomes more clear. And if we realize that, the real impact of music education on kids' lives, not only while they're in school, but for the rest of their lives, this is a worthwhile cause. And so if there's a worthwhile cause, then you can develop the energy to do it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Talking Up Music Education was recorded live from Music for All Bands of America Grand Nationals Championship at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Let's go back to talk about this idea of coalitions and working with other groups. And while we all have this idea of the value of music education, maybe how we get there, what that end result, what that end goal looks like, may be different to every individual, every organization. So while partnerships are extremely important and extremely valuable, there can be some bumps in the road along the way. I'm curious maybe what some of those bumps are and how you've dealt with them and how you work with partnerships.
Well, for where we're at, we're early in the process, so we're really only talking about a small group of people. But even with that small group of people, it's challenging because we all have day jobs, right? So we're all doing this as, in addition to our day job. So our time and our energy is limited. The other thing I found is, we come together and we have a meeting and we discuss what we're going to do, and then we all go back to our day jobs, and so momentum is hard to build and it's easy to lose. So we come together and we make decisions, but then, we're all human and our minds go elsewhere. And you sit down 2 weeks later and look at those notes and say, what was I thinking when I wrote this down? So it's back to that energy and time that it takes to get it done. It's been a challenge for us, for sure.
I would concur. I mean, it's I was just talking to Eric about, the NAMM fly-in for 2016, and I don't think that the music industry or education is any different than anybody else. I mean, they're hot on it, and then you go and you do it, and it's almost you've got to plan out that you're going to be in Jeff City once a quarter talking about this, because to me the time just flies by, and like Mark said, I mean, we've all got so many things and so many irons in the fire. And I think that would probably be one of the greatest challenge, but also, the greatest reward would be to try to separate that issue from the rest of the people that lobby on Capitol Hill or in the state legislature that where they're going once a year, maybe now, you're twice, and then you turn that into 3 times or 4 times. And then if those elected officials see you continuing to come in there, and you're staying in touch with what the legislative agenda is, then you at least have a chance to get your voice in there on that vote. If you just show up at the time, that you hear something's going to happen, I don't think, you're going to be taken as seriously as you could be.
It's building that relationship.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, okay, Mark, you say in Indiana there's 100 school districts. Okay, so there's probably 100 different issues and 100 different ways of looking at it. In Pennsylvania, we have 500 school districts. And I know for a fact that there is this whole wide range of issues. There are so many resources out there. Google music education advocacy, and there's everything that you can come up with. It can almost be overwhelming to someone who says, I want to be an advocate, and where do you begin? Because there are so many nuanced things. I'm curious for some resource ideas. Where have you gone maybe to help focus what you're doing, some ideas to help people out there who want to advocate?
Yeah, this was something that we found really important, was to be able to give usable tools to people who wanted to take it and take that first step. So I actually worked with Mary and NAMM to develop we call it a factoid database. There's so many facts out there, research that's been done over many, many years now. And if you wanted to, you could dive in and you could spend a year reading through all of it. Nobody has time to do that. So, we tried to come up with a way that we could distill that down to bite-sized chunks. And so we came up with this database, and how we've started using it at our own company is that we put this slow, steady drip, drip, drip of we call music truths. And so 4 times a week, we drip to all of our customers, to all of our staff, here's today's truth about music education. And they're just small, short, bite-sized facts. I've got a couple of them here I'll read to you. One of them is, this is just an example. The title is, Americans Believe Music Education Contributes to Personal Fulfillment. That's the subject line. 4 out of 5 Americans believe that music education has contributed to their level of personal fulfillment, according to the Harris poll, July 2014. Short truth that is easy to digest, easy to share. And so what we've done is we've put those out, and then we've put the challenge out to not only our staff as individuals, but also our music educator partners, the band and orchestra teachers that we serve, to, number one, we put it out so they understand it and they're encouraged by it, but number 2, so then they take it and then they share it. In this day of social media where it's so easy to share something and for it to become viral, that's our goal, is to have these simple, easy, bite-sized chunks to go out and to be shared within each circle of influence. And so again, that's the way I look at the world. It's a long, slow, steady march. It's not a sprint. And so we just made the commitment that this is something that we're just going to do. It's part of our everyday life.
Tom, resources?
Well, probably the best that I have had recently was with the NAMM fly-in on the study that was put together, which we shared on Capitol Hill in our meetings that day, and then
the striking a chord.
Yes. And then I had some of those sent to me, which I kind of view that as, we all have stacks of paper on our desk and stuff, that we know we don't want to throw it away, but we aren't doing anything right with it then. But then, if administrators in these districts, and especially we have a store on the Kansas side of the state line that has had, the state of Kansas had a $400 million budget, shortfall this year. So it's always an issue. And, having those materials at our fingertip to get to the superintendent, through our various channels, and then they may not do anything with it right now, but at some point, they kind of will get to those bite size, those key points on page 22 of the study in terms of what's important to parents and educators.
And I would encourage people to go to nammfoundation.org, take a look at the striking accord, which talk to educators and parents, two obviously very important stakeholders in education. And there's a lot of really easy shareable graphs and things in there. So yeah, that's a great report. So let me go to the last question for both of you, and it's really a broad one, but kind of relying on both of your experience in advocacy. To somebody who's out there who wants to start advocacy, to ramp up their advocacy work more, what's your takeaway? What's your advice for them? Mark, you want to start?
Yeah, going back to Bob Morrison's statement, you have to first start by being an advocate. So isn't something that you can direct others to do if you're not willing to do it yourself. So that was one lesson that I learned that really helped to shape our decision-making process going forward. And I would just challenge, everyone who hears this message, if you believe in the power of music education, you can and should do something. It doesn't mean that you have to go to Washington, D.C., to advocate at the federal level. But you can have a conversation with a school board member or a local legislator, that has impact. So everybody can do something. And I guess my biggest challenge would be just start, just do something. I was so kind of moved by this whole process that we took it to the next level, and we made it part of our company's mission. That we are in the school band and orchestra business, so we have been serving school band and orchestra programs for years, but we've never really been involved in that next level of advocacy. And so I challenged our staff to not only serve, but to commit to strengthening music education. And so we have this saying at our store now that our goal is to champion music education at the state level and at the local level where we live. So it's part of our company mission. It's something that we talk about each day. And I think every individual, every organization has a chance to do something. And then once you do the one thing, you become comfortable with that, and then you can take the next step and the next step.
Okay. Tom, some takeaways?
Well, I would echo that. I mean, I think that, if you're passionate about this, you're going to have to do it yourself or take a leadership role, and I think starting at the community level, the school board members as well as, your local state representatives. I mean, they're very available, and just being out in front of the issue, because once that snowball has got started rolling in a negative way, then trying to get it to stop and then getting in front of it, it's already taken on some life and some legs. So more of that, inch by inch kind of approach to making sure that your voice is heard and that what you are passionate about, and if it is music education, that it's that issue that you've taken on.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's part of that first step is keying into what's happening in your state and what's happening at the local level. We're in this presidential election cycle, and that's all we hear about, but there's so much we can hear about at the state and local level where so many more of the education decisions are happening. Tom and Mark, thank you so much. You're both very inspiring what you're doing in your states. It's great to hear your stories. Thank you for joining us today and sharing these strategies for building state coalitions to advocate for having music education taught by a qualified music teacher in the classroom. I remind all of you listening to subscribe to Talking Up Music Education, available in iTunes or Stitcher. And if you like what you hear, please share with friends, family, and your social network. Make sure to also visit nammfoundation.org to sign up to receive their newsletter, which comes out at the end of every month. I'm Mark Despotakis, sitting in for Mary Larson, and this has been Talking Up Music Education, recorded live at Music for All's Bands of America Grand National Championships.
A special thanks to our guest moderator today, Mark Despotakis, and guests Mark Goff and Tom Meyer for their important contribution to Talking Up Music Education, the podcast on music education coming to you from the NAMM Foundation. Be sure you stay in touch with us about news and events coming up with NAMM and the NAMM show in January at www.nammfoundation.org. Be sure you subscribe to this podcast, Talking Up Music Education, and thanks for all of your great efforts to keep music education strong. Bye-bye.
Talking Up Music Education is a podcast created by the NAMM Foundation. To learn more about how you can support music education in your community or how you can be part of the work of the NAMM Foundation, visit our website, www.nammfoundation.org, or join us on Facebook at facebook.com/NAMM Foundation. You can also follow Mary on Twitter at Mary LNAMM.